Milton Memorial Birthing Center actually started and was erected in 1976 by the late Gladys Milton, who was a midwife in this area for some 40 years before she passed away in 1999. But she was first recruited to become a midwife by the Walton County Health Department. And that recruitment came because there was a need for midwives in that area at that time because the midwives who had been practicing were not practicing. And so in this particular area of North Walton County, it left the delivery of women to the two doctors who were in Florella, Alabama at that time. And it was one of those doctors who came here to our home and delivered me. Now, this is during the days of segregation when black women really couldn't go to the hospitals, and so it had to be that these doctors came to deliver them. And as I understand it, the day after my birth, the doctor who had delivered me contacted the Walton County Health Department, and he was telling them that he had been told that they had been looking for somebody who they could train as a midwife, and they couldn't find anyone. He said, well, I just met this lady, her name is Gladys Milton, and I think you need to get up there and train her, because what he was telling them was that they had gotten so busy delivering babies that they didn't have time to take care of the sick people. And that was the way it was viewed at that time. Birth was not viewed as a sickness. It wasn't treated as a sickness. And there was this need for a midwife. Well, they did train my mother as a midwife, and she was licensed in 1959. And then after she was licensed for the first 17 years of her practice, she went into the homes of these women in Walton County, in Okaloosa County, in Covington County, Alabama, in Geneva County, Alabama, Holmes County, all this general area wherever there was a need. But now she didn't deliver just for black women, I guess, as she had been recruited to do. All women during that time, no matter what your color was, used midwives. And so if there was a need for a midwife, then she would service that need. But then after 17 years of doing that, she built an attachment onto her home. And it was a place where instead of her going into the homes of these women could come here. And that was a good time during that time, because at that time she had been practicing for a lot of years, and the roads were getting more dangerous and unsafe for especially women to be out late night, you know, the way she was. And so the birthing center more or less provided a place where low-risk women could come and basically have birth at her home as opposed to having birth at their home. And it was in 1976 when it opened up, and then the state started inspecting her in 1980. Now, from 1976 to 1980, we didn't have inspection. She just kind of ran the birthing center, had births here and everything, and then one day the state shows up and they say, we understand that you have this business here that you're running, and so you need to have a license. And my mother, with her sometimes naive self, would say, I'm not running a business, because in her mind she wasn't selling anything, and that's what she told me. I'm not selling anything here. Now, I do have this little place in the back where people come and have the babies, but that's not a business. Oh yes, it is, Miss Gladys, that's the business. Then you're going to have to start getting a license for it, which she did. She got a license, and we continued to work. But then the attitude about midwives changed, and people were thinking that birth outside of a hospital was not safe, and that people really need to start going to the hospitals to have their babies. But yet there was a group of women, especially during that time, who didn't have health insurance and who didn't qualify for these programs that would offer them assistance. So by and large, those were the women who continued to use her services. And then women who still wanted a more natural childbirth, even though they may have had insurance or whatever, they chose to have less interventions. And the people who still come here do that because our philosophy is not to intervene unless it's absolutely necessary. And in most cases it's not necessary because we only deal with low-risk women. And pregnancy is not an illness, it's not a disease, it's not the same thing as having a heart attack or a stroke or anything like that. If women are allowed to go into labor on their own, and the labor is not augmented, I'm saying no artificial rupture of the membrane, no pain medication even. It hurts to have a baby, but the pain is necessary. You don't need to speed up the process. You don't need to slow down the process. You don't need to do anything but to allow the process to happen and monitor to make sure that everything's going okay. And sometimes when these babies come out, it's like, oh gosh, thank you. Glad that's over with. And then they start crying and the women, yeah, yeah, yeah. Even though my mother has been gone since 1999, there are people who still come up to me and say what a difference she made in their births. And that's something that even she used to say, my work will outlive me, and it really has. And I'm hoping that the same thing will happen to me. You know, once I'm gone, I've been doing this for 40 years now in April. Because see, this work is not about us. It's not about Gladys Milton, it's not about Maria Milton. It's about what midwives do and the services that they provide for low-risk women. Beginning in 1959 on up until really 1997 or so, my mother delivered over 3,000 babies, both in Florida and in Alabama. And really for her work as a midwife, she was inducted into the Florida Women's Hall of Fame, and then she was also inducted into the Okaloosa County Women's Hall of Fame because she had done births in Okaloosa County as well. Now, since I've been doing it, I've done over 800 births. And so it's not so much about the number, it's about the quality of the care that's being given to these women, because that is what makes all the difference. But it was a blessing, really, to see these people who we've delivered and see how the children have grown and changed over the years. And my mother did it during her lifetime, and in my lifetime, I'm doing it now. And whenever she passed away, there were a cross-section of people who came and sent condolences, gave condolences, and that has actually continued. But it wasn't about us, it was about doing what we thought and still think, for me, is God's will. Actually, looking back on my life and really using my mother's life as an example, it is a blessing in helping these people. Because one of the things my mother used to say all the time, they may forget this or that, but they don't forget how you made them feel. Now, when my mom passed away, there was a woman who called. She said, I just want to talk to somebody in the family. I don't know anybody except Miss Gladys, but I'm her daughter, and so, you know, I'm a midwife too. And what she said is that when my mom was a nurse at Mizell Memorial Hospital in Awe, that she was 18. Father was not involved in the baby's life, and she went to the hospital. It was just her and her mother who went. But her mother had to leave and go to work. And as it happened, it was one of those times when my mother wasn't quite as busy. By her being there, my mother was able to spend time with her, a lot of time with her. And she said my mother came in and just stayed with her, explaining to her what's going on and what to expect and everything. And my mother, for years and years and years, worked that 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. shift, and oftentimes she would clock out at 11, and if these people were going to deliver within the next hour or two, it wasn't a doubt that she was going to stay. She would clock out, but she would still stay there at the hospital. And she said that that's what happened that night. She said, I was 18, I was scared, wasn't nobody there but me and Miss Gladys. She said, but that made such an impression on me that, and I've never forgotten that. And she said, and I just want to talk to somebody in the family to tell them what a difference that made in my whole life. I said, but how long ago has that been? She said, oh, my son is 27 years old now. And so that said to me, you do what God has called you to do and do it in His way. And once I'm gone, I want them to say, yeah, she was a crazy woman, but she made me feel good because God was in her and she wanted to do what God had for her to do.